rental demand is absolutely huge. Over the last 20 years, we've gone from about 10% of all households being in rented accommodation. This is private rented accommodation, not social housing where you're basically renting off the state. We've gone from about 10% to 20%. And in some age groups, particularly 25 to 34-year-olds, it's up above 45, almost 50% of people who are renting. And this is an interesting survey from RICS, very, very authoritative. And let's see what it says. What the survey of letting agents says is that between May and July, 54% of agents said rents rose compared to the same period in the previous year, even though there's been a cost of living crisis. And even more significantly, I would say, the same survey of letting agents by RICS says that between August and October, that 3-month period, you got 63% predicting further rent rises. Now, the average rent in England is £1,367 per month per property. So that may be split between a family or students renting together, young professionals, whatever it is. But that's up quite sharply from £1,249 per month last September. So there are particular rent hotspots, university towns, London, of course, but also Manchester and Newcastle. There are signs of the rental market getting tighter and tighter as demand increases. So even though a lot of people renting have had cuts in their real wages, rents are still going up, and there's a lot of competition for properties.
And is that partly because landlords are struggling to pay their mortgages, so they've got no choice, or they're having to sell up and then there's fewer places to rent on the market? There
are quite a lot of landlords without mortgages because, you know, they've been doing buy-to-rent, buy-to-let for quite a long time. But a lot of buy-to-let properties are themselves mortgaged, and the mortgage rates are often higher than if it's your principal residence. And, of course, they've had increases in their mortgage costs, and some of those have been passed on. You know, there are landlords that aren't passing rents on, that aren't passing higher, that aren't increasing rents, even though in many ways the market suggests that they could. There are other landlords who, of course, are unscrupulous, and even if they own the property outright, they're turning the screw on their tenants and increasing rents as much as they possibly can. Lots of uncertainty, lots of tax breaks disappearing for landlords, lots of legislation swirling around in this area. Even under the Tories and under Labour, it would become more punitive for landlords as far as they see. So all in all, it's quite an uncertain market. And we must remember, a lot of young people rent, not just students, but young people trying to make their way, because it is so hard to get on the housing ladder these days. And that's not just a London and South East thing. You know, back in the early 90s, over 50% of 25 to 34-year-olds had their own property, lived in their own properties, and now it's under 30%. Yeah, so that's a really significant change. I bought my own house in 1999, and I was in my early 20s. Yeah. I cannot imagine doing that now, and I'm so, you know, grateful, obviously, looking back. When you bought that house, Pip, the average price of a house across the UK as a whole would have been between 4 and 5 times average annual earnings, right? In the mid and late 90s. I think I bought it for about 60-odd thousand. Yeah, and you were probably earning... I don't know. That's his reaction, the 20-something here. You might have been earning about... 60. And you might have been earning about 20,000, say, if you were making your way in journalism at that time, 3 times your mortgage, 3 times your annual salary, Bob's your uncle, you can get a loan for that. But now, rather than 4 or 5 times average annual earnings, the average house across the UK costs more like 8 to 9 times. So even if there are 2 of you and you can only get 3 times your earnings each, that's only 6 times. Yeah. So you're not going to make it. And, of course, that's a national average. London and the South East, the average house is 12, 15, some districts, not particularly flash districts. That was in the Midlands for me. 20 times average earning.